welcome to Simcast, a podcast brought to you by the Society for Imaging, Informatics, and Medicine.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Simcast. If you're listening to this podcast, and I imagine you are, there's a very good chance that yourself or probably someone you've worked with across your career has received imaging informatics training from our guest today. Our guest is Herman Oosterwijk. Herman is a healthcare imaging and IT veteran. He's trained literally thousands of professionals in more than 20 countries over the past 25 years on PACS and healthcare IT standards such as DICOM, HL7, and IHE. He publishes extensively in the form of books, articles, and blogs, and enjoys living in Texas close to his grandkids and kids, where he lives an active lifestyle together with his soulmate, Joanna. On a personal note, I always find these types of episodes of Simcast where we sit down and chat with luminaries that have helped shape the industry to be the most enjoyable, and this episode definitely did not disappoint. Herman, it's a lot of fun, and he was able to share a lot about imaging informatics and life in general. So with all that said, sit back, grab some popcorn, and enjoy the episode.
Herman, welcome. Thank you for being on the podcast today. Maybe you can take us through sort of a roadmap of how your career evolved and how you ended up in medical informatics, if you don't mind.
Sure, Mohannad, I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of my journey, so to speak. When you think of a journey, and I have quite a bit of a journey, like 45 years or so in medical informatics. And when you think about a journey, there's a lot of decisions you make because you can go different paths. Any career, you go to the road and you go, do I go left, right, or straight? And making the right decision that determines what path you end up in. And the objective is to end up in a place that you really feel that you have fulfilled your passion. That's really what your mission is all about. And so let me tell you a little bit about this journey. And so I started, of course, in high school. If you're in high school, you have no clue what you want to do. I can relate to that because I just asked my grandson, Ben, and Ben said, Ben, he's 15 years. So I said, Ben, what is it that you want to do when you grow up? And he said, I don't know. So that is very typical. When I was 15 years, I probably said, so I don't know. You really have no idea. But so what happened, I was in high school and I was kind of technical and I was in technical college. And so I had to make a decision. Let's go to the school. I don't have to go too far from home. And there were 4 directions I go. And there was civil engineering. And I said, no, civil engineering, this guy with the big boots on, slushing through the mud. And that's not for me. And there was mechanical engineering. Oh, this guy to build the bridges. And we had an instructor that he was known to be an instructor because he did build a bridge and apparently the bridge broke down or something. So no, that doesn't look like something for me. Architecture, that was really fascinating. I traveled quite a bit and I was always amazed by these buildings and I thought that would be super cool. But I knew my strengths and my weaknesses. I couldn't really draw that much, and creativity is not my strongest point. I'm an implementer. I'm a doer. I fix things. So creator, so I didn't think that was me. So the only choice was actually electrical engineering. And it happens to be also the most challenging. People say, okay, well, remember, this is going to be the most hard. And for some reason, I kind of like challenges. So I ended up as an electrical engineer. So that was my first decision, high school, electrical engineering. And then the next step, what do you do as an electrical engineer? We're driving down, and my parents were taking the strips, and we were driving the road, and I saw this big building on the side of the road, and I said, Philips Medical Systems. And then I had the Germans called it aha-erlebnis. Aha-erlebnis, like a light bulb. So, okay, that's it. Medical systems, I can make a difference, right? After I finished college electrical engineering, I said, I want to be in the medical system. I couldn't get in there because at first I had to go in the army for 2 years and economy was not as good. So I ended up at Philips Radar Systems. So I made a little bit of a sidestep. I went to the left instead of I wanted to go to the right, and I went to the left. But here was the good news. Sometimes you go to a road you think it's a dead end, but you learn along the way, because that gave me the opportunity, being an electrical engineer, to learn about software. A physician came over, said, we need to have a software tester. Okay, that sounds cool. I'll do that. And I said, I need to learn more about it. I went back to school, learned about software. And then I heard about CT scanners. I got this article and I thought, wow, you go in this machine, You manipulate the software and you look inside the body. How cool is that, right? That's what I want to do. So got my software degree, and 3 years later was an opening at Philips Medical System, works as a developer on the first generation for Philips CT scanners. So that's how my first passion kind of evolved. Technical, healthcare, CT scanner. Anytime when you have a mission and a vision, so to speak, my mission at that time was work in a company that impacts patient lives and work on the latest and greatest and coolest technology. And it was kind of fun. It was challenging, of course, and writing the software. And we had the image coming up when a patient comes into the CT scanner, after 30 minutes, the image came up. And then we learned how to program to take instruction out and another instruction out and another instruction out, and then became 15 minutes. And then we saw these tricking artifacts, because if you do the head images, you get all these bone artifacts. We could do some filtering and we could see more clear. So that was my first start, my first passion. And that was very, very satisfying. My second passion is actually traveling. I would have my magnetic tapes under the arm and we go to Leeds in the UK and install the software, and then travel to Lund, was the first hospital in Sweden that had the first CT scanners. And it was a big adventure. Of course, scary. I remember still, we go with this big boat from Copenhagen to Malmö to Lund, and you come in this hospital. I said, I don't speak any Swedish. And I go in the hospital elevator and said, okay, where do I go next? And I saw next to me, there was a guy that had a little suitcase. Philips said, I need to talk to you. I need to see, where's the Philips CT scanner? I need to have installed the software. So that was a lot of fun. So that was my first passion. Okay.
Herman, you're talking about passion and your path, and that's great. But I'm kind of curious, how much did luck play into this? Like, you talked a little bit about there was this opportunity to do the software developing and testing. How much of that kind of opportunity and luck played into your path?
Yeah, I don't believe in luck. No, I don't believe in luck. I think it's all about perseverance. Of course, the opportunities has to be there, right? I mean, if there wouldn't be an opening in the CT development group at Philips, I wouldn't be there. But if that wouldn't have been there, I would have persevered, and maybe there would be, I don't know, at MRI, or there would be at Siemens, or there would be, if you have a focus, I don't believe necessarily in luck. I believe in perseverance, and then the environment and opportunities has to be there. So when you have a passion, I'm pretty convinced, and that's what I felt, whatever I want to go, whatever goal I set, whatever mission and vision, I was able to do that. And sometimes it takes a while. I had to spend 3 years at the Philips radar systems. But looking back, it was useful. Sometimes you go down the wrong path, but then you enjoy the scenery because I learned how to do software. The same thing happened to me when I came to the United States. After several years, I had an opportunity to work with AT&T on the big ComView, revolutionary, exciting, the first PAC system, one of the first PAC systems in the whole world, Philips AT&T. I went to AT&T. So I want to work with AT&T. Super, working in the Bell Labs, Koenigke and Ritchie down the hall, the inventors of Unix. That was, for me, it was like the ultimate. And so again, that was kind of a little sidestep, because after 2 or 3 years, I talked to my wife and said, New Jersey is not for us. We're not really that happy. I learned a lot. So I went back to Connecticut and I ended up in Dallas with Kodak and the third generation of PAC system. So I think it's all about perseverance. Yeah.
So I have a question, because I'm trying to paint a picture in my mind about you going into Philips. So what year would we be talking here, if you don't mind?
Oh, yeah. Now I have to think myself, because it's a long time ago. So in 73, I went to the army. 75, I started with Philips in Holland, in the Netherlands, and I spent a couple of years there. Then opportunity came up. I was doing some programming work. I had to learn the acquisition system for the CT scanners, and it was actually developed by Analogic in Boston. So I went to Boston a couple of times. I came back home, and I told my wife, I'd like to go to America. And so she went there together. We visited some family, some relatives. She lived here. I said, that would be super cool. And again, it's not luck. It's not luck. I told my boss, I want to go to the United States. And they said, okay. And I had to wait for a year. And then the president of Philips in the United States came to visit Holland. the president over there said, we have this problem. We sold these CT scanners at Michigan State University, MSU. We told them, no problem, we can send all the images to the main MSU campus. But we have no clue how to do it. We need help. And he said, well, we have this guy, Herman, and he said he really was excited. He liked to go to the United States, so let's talk with him. So, I took an opportunity. That was another very good experience. Came to the United States. 3 little girls, my 3 little kids, 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years old. We all in this big first class KLM. All these guys around me, all these business guys go, what is this guy doing? And this young guy with all the little kids in the first class. We get there, rented a car, we went to Connecticut. And I worked at the Michigan State University. And it was an amazing experience. Actually, I don't deserve a lot of the credit because the work was all done. The researchers at MSU, we would take these CT images, we would simulate the independent workstation, and the simulator would send the images over a broadband cable network. On the other side, it would convert it back and take a big simulator for CT, and that would be the workstation vision. We did it for 3 sites. And again, there was nothing DICOM, nothing was just completely proprietary. But we started writing about it, articles. I was invited to go to Japan. And so Japan, a whole story by itself, but because you go in Tokyo, first time ever, I couldn't find the conference. So I talked to the counter and I said, so I need to go to this conference. I said, you go left, right, this, and there's the conference. So the night before I walked there, I couldn't find it. So I go back to the front desk. I said, I need to go to this conference. I said, yeah, left, right, to the. I go back, I couldn't find it. And remember, this is Japan, right? Tokyo, everything is in Japanese. You don't even know the street name. And I went back for the second time. I said, this is really cool. I go back to the 3rd time, and I see this little sign on the bottom, conference with an arrow. I thought, okay, I know I need to go tomorrow. So it's this talk. We talk about this Michigan State University networking system between the CT scanners. Again, what a journey, what an amazing experience. After that, I went to Japan a couple of times, working with the vendors there. And then my wife is the same. She likes travels. We spent some time rolling out Japan, and it was a lot of fun.
You mentioned the mid-'70s, and you mentioned the DICOM was not around yet. And you are someone that is involved in a lot of standards, and you're at Connect-a-thon. So maybe you could share with us, how did you get involved in standards? And I'd love to hear some of the stories about, you were around before DICOM. So what was it like when DICOM was getting from NEMA to actually DICOM?
Yeah, so the late 80s, my boss says, Herman, we need to have somebody going to Washington, D.C. because there's this new standards committee, HCR NEMA. We need you to represent Philips. I said, sure, I wouldn't mind getting out of the office. Take my kids, they go up and down elevators, spend the time in the pool and see the White House, and I go to this meeting. So we were creating this HCR NEMA standard. And I remember I would go every 2 months working on the standard. I worked with Steve Horry in NYU Medical Center, a little corner, and then we first created the tape standard. As soon as we created the tape standard, it was already obsolete because we use the big reel-to-reel tapes anymore. But of course, the next one was the 50-pin connector, and then DICOM came along. I got really 2 reasons. Get out of the office, first of all, but you get to know other people, and really you get to know the industry. But it was very helpful for me because at a certain point in time when the whole excitement with Philips, AT&T, ComView, PACS went down a little bit, and remember, and you've probably experienced in the vendor, it's like a roller coaster, up, down. So Philips was down, ComView didn't quite work, they didn't have another partner yet. Well, I went to these DICOM meetings and I talked with the Kodak representatives, listen, can I work for you guys? And they know each other, and sure, we'll talk to Rochester. And they said, sure, but you need to go to Dallas. I said, okay, no problem. I go to Dallas, Texas. Of course, my kids said, I don't want to go to Texas. And then my wife said, I don't want to go to Texas. And so I took, first of all, I bribed my kids. Okay, we got a pool. Bribed my wife. We went over to Dallas and they looked at the homes and she said, sold. We have these, what they call McMansions here. Huge, beautiful, nice homes. So that's how I got involved in the standard. But I have to tell you, you could consider me a DICOM expert at that time, but I really didn't know that much about DICOM. You don't learn as much in DICOM till you start teaching. One of my colleagues there, and actually forgot his name, and he worked for Sedara, one of those old companies again, in Toronto. I'm sick of tired because all of my colleagues, they keep on asking me all these DICOM questions, and I don't get any work done. So you've been around for a while. Why don't you teach them? I said, sure. So remember that at that time, we had overheads. The little things. So take my whole set of overheads. They had an overhead projector. I was teaching DICOM, and I was really sweating it. Okay, we go out to dinner at night, and I was still studying. What is this subclass again? What is it? Transfer syntax? That's how you start. When you teach, this is how you learn how this stuff works. So I made it, and I was really surprised because after everybody, well, this is great. And I thought, oh, gee, I don't know how well I did. And then the next step was, maybe this is a business. So I told my wife, you know what? We're going to announce DICOM class, Washington, D.C., the first week of November. At that time, there was I think it was, what kind of hotel it was? Anyway, it was not one of those big Marriott for sure, because I couldn't afford it and I couldn't take that risk. I think it was a Radisson or something. DICOM course, 3 days. I sent it over an email. 15 people signed up. So I did my first class there, or my second class actually, commercial class, and I said, this is a business. And of course, from then on, you start learning, and then you find out you can teach DICOM, but you need to have developed tools. So you develop some tools to look at headers, to do some communication. From then I went on. After these DICOM classes, they got a couple of students said, we need to know about this HL7 stuff. Okay, no problem. I joined the HL7 committee, was co-chair of one of the committees for a couple of years, learned how HL7 works. And then after a couple of years, Steve Moore from Boston University and St. Louis, and then Chris Carr from the RSNH said, you need to get involved with the Connectathon. We could use you as a monitor, but of course, we have all these vendors coming, and that's what we do. We do DICOM and HL7 connections, and I just check them and check off, okay, oh, this is how it works. So that's how I got involved in training. My second passion, so at first was technology, healthcare, CT scanners, and then there was training and really the communication standard. Right? Most of the time I spend now training, and it came almost like natural. And it's kind of another interesting anecdote. How do I found out that I like training? I could do it well because back to the old CT days at Philips, my boss told me, so we have this meeting going on, this application specialist training, for the new CT scanner, new release software, and it's going to be in LA. So we went to Connecticut, go to LA. I've never been in LA before. Come down now, palm trees, Hollywood. No, that was really exciting. Okay, and then I had to teach this 15 women. You get all the attention. That was really good. They really treated me really, really well. And I explained how the CT scanner works. So yeah, this is the data, and this is the reconstruction, and this and this and that. I made very simple drawings. And then after the fact, there's women, we had dinner at night. They said, Herman, thank you very much. I mean, I worked in CT for 6-7 years and never understood how it worked. And I think from my perspective, I am a simple person. I need to conceptualize. I need to simplify things. I want to understand things. If I can understand it myself, and then I can explain it to somebody else. And that's really, I think, my strength and my gift. So training became my passion, because one of the things I really enjoy is people say, aha, or even more, I see my students growing beyond what I teach them. For example, later this afternoon, we have another preparation for another web call, and there are going to be 2 students talking about Wireshark. I taught them how to do Wireshark, but they're already going beyond that. They told me how to use Wireshark to do all this cool thing. I think that's the satisfaction of being a trainer, to give them a little bit and have the students go with it. And I say, aha, and then making a difference.
So you're talking a bit about the early days of DICOM, and DICOM has its advantages and disadvantages, but even earlier on, there are aspects of DICOM that were built in from the beginning that were very future-proofing, if you will. Like, you had to kind of see ahead. How did you guys look ahead and not just focus on the problem at hand? Because it takes a lot to be able to look 5-10 years down the road and plan a standard so that it'll have a longer run. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and actually, if you think about it, DICOM has been around since 1993. That's quite a long, it's almost 30 years, right? And I think so many aspects of DICOM are just 1990s technology. if we would build DICOM today, the data format, it would be XML-based or JSON. At that time, we didn't know what XML was. I mean, it was not really popular. We didn't have JSON. And so we came up with this tagged protocol, like 1010 for the patient name and stuff. And from a communication perspective protocol, we didn't have anything else. Then, okay, we had the OSI protocol. So we picked a protocol, we picked a structure, and we actually found out that technology or that the choice we made, that really doesn't matter. Let me take an analogy. Ethernet today is based on 1980s technology. Like the frame sizes of Ethernet is like the number of characters that fits on the VT100 screen for the IBM terminal. It's still around. So there's a lot of things in DICOM that are still around and are based on that technology, but it works. But I think the vision is like the concept of having a class definition that you can negotiate, that's very flexible. And then sometimes you have to rewrite stuff like we did. For example, in like 10, 15 years ago, we said, no, this concept of this static header, we need to adapt it for multi-frame, for dynamic studies. So we did a multi-frame, enhanced MRI-CT. And of course, several years ago, we said, oh, the protocol doesn't really fit for mobile applications. So we have a web-based version. But if you think about, so DICOM Web, the whole Wadu thing, but the core, having the subclass definition and a very flexible data definition still stands. And very similar to Ethernet, TCP, all of that technology is there and useful today. So, yeah, how do you do that? I don't know. I guess a group of smart minds has said, okay, how do we do that? And I wouldn't claim to be the smartest person in the room. I mean, there were some really smart people. One other good example, like David Clooney and Charles Perizeau and then Dean Bidgo, they really come up with the whole idea of structured reporting. What are the concepts of structure? How can you make any report in the whole world, whether it's an ultrasound, whether it's a key object selection document, whether it's a computer-aided diagnosis, and it still stands. How can you come up with a structure, a DICOM structured report with a content, a relationship definitions that will carry it for 30 years and probably another 30 years, right? Very, very smart people and have a vision. And like I said, I'm not so much a creator, but I'm more an implementer, and I can understand it. And I just support the smart people coming with ideas and concept, and I will help to deploy and teach it. So, yeah, it's challenging and it's fun, actually. Very, very rewarding too, actually.
Thank you, Herman. The conversation with you can go in so many different directions. We can talk about so many different things, but there's actually one slightly lighthearted thing I want to hear a little bit more from you on, because you talked early on about your travel stories, liking to traveling around Europe, the United States. So in your newer part of your life, being a trainer, you've obviously traveled to many remote places, and I'm sure you have some really cool, interesting stories to share. You want to share a few, and then we can move on to something else?
Yeah, travel story. So I taught probably more than 20 different countries. In the process of that, I traveled to more than 70 countries actually around the world. And so I always had a passion for international. I mean, growing up in Europe, in Holland, we go shopping in Germany every other weekend. You go skiing and I'm not a skier, but people go skiing in northern Italy. I would hike mountains in Austria. Over Christmas, you go to Paris. We take a class, we go to London. And that starts really early on. And when I was 16 years old, I had a little moped. One of my best friends, Peter, at that time, one of the things we were really fascinated with was World War II. Because it heard from our parents. They struggled for the occupation from the Germans, and the Americans and the Canadians were the heroes, how the liberation and all that. And our teachers and our parents' generation, we lived through that. So I told my friends, we need to check it out. So on my little moped, all the way from Holland, Brussels, Antwerp, all the way to the Normandy coast. And we were looking at these beaches, the Normandy beaches, some of the old equipment there. And then, of course, the most impressive is this big graveyard. It's built on a hill. So when you stand at the graveyard, that I don't know how many, thousands and thousands of Americans and Canadians. And as far as you can see, crosses. Very impressive. Anyway, so because I guess I'm used to traveling. So then I just talked to you about the first business trip all the way to Japan. But let me give it a little bit of twist as well. I also like humanitarian work. And I got involved with that for the Rotary International. We had a priest that came with the choir singing and one of our Rotary clubs. And they said, so what are some of the things like we can help you with? And he said, we need to build a school. And so I organized the team, go down, we built school, we built some clinics. That was the motivation. I mean, we talk about different passions. One of my passions is humanitarian work. And the reason was that I remember still one of my first trainings in Bangalore. You know, all the high-tech companies, Philips, Siemens, GE, they have all their headquarters in India. Of course, it was obvious that I would do the DICOM training there. I sit in this big restaurant, the big hotel, all the way on the top floor. It had a nice pool. In the morning, I go swimming and I look at the left. There's IBM, HP, all these big campuses. In the front of the hotel, there's a slum. And every morning I look at one woman coming out every morning, make a little fire outside, a couple of kids running out. And I thought, wow, what a contrast. How can I make a difference? And then I figured out, okay, I want to make a difference. So working for an organization like Rotary and Red Aid, as a good example, maybe I give $100, maybe I give $1,000, but they can multiply. If you can tap into those resources of people and organizations, and then you can actually move mountains. So that's my other passion. So I got involved with traveling around. Red Aid is an excellent organization. If you're not a volunteer, I urge you to sign up. It's amazing the things you encounter. And one of the things that I see in a lot of Americans, they don't travel enough. One of my goals is to take all of my 8 grandchildren, believe it or not, I have 8 grandchildren. I want to take them all to a place that they want to go. There's only one condition, it has to be outside the United States. They need to see what it is. Arriving in Ghana, because I need to teach a bootcamp for Red Aid, sit in a hotel in the evening and I look outside and say, what's going on? All these people coming in, putting a tents up, big coolers, and of course they don't have refrigerators, big coolers filled with ice for all the beer, all these tents. And a day later, like hundreds of people show up, all dressed in white. Music, dancing, having fun, sharing food. We go outside, and my colleague of mine said, hey, what's going on? They said, we celebrate life. This is a funeral. I thought, wow, come dance with us. And of course, we had to go dancing. And after the dancing, even of course, the day in the morning, I would teach at the university, at the hospital, and they had a big room. And usually I teach with a tie and a suit on. It was actually the first time, no way that you can have a tie, because it was probably like 95 degrees, humid. We had 2 big fans blowing, the papers would blow from the thing. But the students in Ghana, they wanted to learn. They were so happy to see me. They wanted to learn about DICOM 807. They want to install the viewing station, the PAC system. Jason knows about it. Jason has been there as well. That experience, and then afterwards, they're so hungry. They care about you, and it's very, very rewarding. So another passion is humanitarian work. And the process of travel, I'm actually writing a travel book. I wait for a couple of more years. If it gets a little bit quiet, I'll tell my stories. But the experiences and the thing we learn, it makes you humbling.
Sign me up for that book, please.
Yeah.
Just one quick thing. So for any of the listeners that are interested in what Herman's saying, episode 26 of Simcast, we interviewed the PACS admin at Corlebu Teaching Hospital, which is Ben. And I believe he was in your boot camp the week before. So yeah, if you're interested in hearing the experience from Ben's perspective, episode 26. So, anyone that Googles your name or Googles about DICOM training, your name will come up. And I'm curious about, you talked about training as a mechanism for learning, which it tends to be a very useful one. Were you always just natively training people or teaching people when you were a child or as you were growing up?
To be honest, I never thought about it, actually, because some people have been patient, so I'm going to be a teacher. And I think actually I thought I was a pretty poor teacher. Actually, maybe because, I don't know about you, but if I have my kids coming out to me and say, Dad, I need some help with math. I know math. And I started to explain to them, and then either I get impatient or we end up into a fight. Like, no, Daddy, this is not, my teacher tells me to do it like this, and this is not how it's supposed to be. And then they get dramatic, you know what I mean? I never thought I would be a trainer at all. Circle back to the story I told earlier. When I started at work, start to teach people how things work. And if I trace back all the way, it's not necessarily when I was in the United States and teaching a group of application specialists, but also when I was running the implementation of the software, I would make these sketches and these little simple diagrams. I guess for now you would call it cheat sheets. Like, how do things work? I mean, it probably would be my best favorite work. Like, how do things work? I try to understand it and understand it myself, and then present it to others. And then people say, oh, that is how it works. So I think that's how I discovered that training was a career. But I had to catch up a lot because after a couple of years, I went to a local university in Texas, because my IT person was a student there. And so he said, Herman, you should talk with my professor because you know a lot about healthcare and medical informatics. So I went to the professor, and the professor, later on, she said, it was actually a lady, the head of the department. And she said, Herman, no, when I heard you talking, I know you would be good for my students. So then she said, okay, so you can do a medical informatics class next semester. Okay, sure. Okay, we'll talk about this and that, and DICOM and medical imaging, da. Okay, so we'll have an appointment next week, and I want from you 10-page learning objectives, detailed curriculum, exercises, hands-on, and essay questions. And I thought, holy cow, what is that all about? And the good news was she gave me an example. After I started really doing training for several years, almost like a reverse engineering, I had to say, oh, I teach DICOM. Well, what do you mean teach DICOM? No, you need to have an outcome that can be measured. So, of course, and then I had to really learn the whole education component and the methods of learning and the things of that. And then I loved it a lot. I really liked it because I was teaching the students the things I always liked the best. The two things that I learned. First of all, what students like the best is, number one, hands-on. Seeing is believing. You can talk about DICOM all day long, but until you pull up an image and look at the corner of the image and see the patient name, and then you correlate it to the header, and then DICOM doesn't really make sense. So I believe a strong believer in hands-on. And second, I'm a strong believer in you need to see the real-time environment. So we take this 10 students and we will drive around in a little van to Houston, and we go to MD Anderson and we look at the radiation therapy department. And that's where it ticks. That's where it ticks. And that was my first experience too. My first ever hospital visit. And well, I can exactly remember how it was in Leeds in the UK. I come with a CT scanner, I install a new software, and there was a woman on the table at the same age as my wife, has an amputated leg. And I thought, wow, holy cow, we make a difference. We install the software, and after 20 minutes, the software hangs up. I had to restart the computer. Here's this woman on the table, has to wait for another half an hour because the software was hanging up. I came back, I said, this is not doing something in a cubicle. This is impacting lives. And you really need to have that understanding. So that's why I take the students to a real-time environment. So these are the students for medical informatics. And also with my team, we were doing a film digitizer application. At the time, the early days of PACS, you need to take all these films into the PACS. So we were really proud. I had this team of 5 people, 6 people. We write this application, we had the film digitizer and the user interface and ta-da-da-da. And so I think we do a road trip. So I take them all to Myriad, South Dakota. I said, can I come by? I'd like to show my team what you guys do in a real-time environment. So we walk into the department, and this technology says, use software is the pits. And the different stronger wording. Software is the pits. And everybody goes, say, look what I need to do. I need to put this, see, here I am. I have to do this, and I have to do this. And like 10 steps. And here's my patient. I want to have 1, 2, 3. And everybody goes like, all right, you really need to see in a real-time environment. You need to have the connection with what the impact is. You cannot be in vacuum. So I cannot stress that enough. IT guys and people need to visit. And if you have the opportunity to get them there, then you can see the impact. This was my kind of how do I got involved and how do I learned what learning is all about. And so getting the hands-on and getting to see what the impact you made in a real-time environment, that was really, really important and critical. It still is. I still take my students to hospital to see it. And I still have a very intense hands-on component in my training. Yeah.
Thank you, Herman. So I don't want to presume anything, but I mean, we've talked about your career. It's very lengthy. There are plenty of stories we can share. But what is next as far as career goes? Is retirement on the horizon? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, so retirement is kind of interesting because I have a lot of my colleagues and my friends, they're retired. And so when I talk about retirement, okay, so I've always thought, okay, I'm going to retire when I'm 65 or now 70 or 75. And then I had a discussion, and not really too long ago, and I'm with a good friend of mine. She said, my dad was 93 years old, and he never retired. Maybe that's an option. Maybe I don't have to retire. Why would I retire? I don't have to work to pay the mortgage. Good news is I paid off my mortgage, but I want to follow my passion. And if I have fun and I can follow my passion, if I can teach a boot camp on PACS in South Africa in a heartbeat, of course. Even better if somebody pays for my trip and then I pay out of my pockets of my wife to come with me and we spend another week. You follow a passion. And one of the things, though, I believe that at a certain point in time, you need to have multiple passions. So my passion might, in a couple of years, might not be maybe necessarily my company Otech, but my passion will be really what I do, what I like. And one of my passions is teaching. So I will be starting teaching woodworking. Here in Denton, where I live, we have a center there. People are unemployed, PTSD, VA people, so wood therapy. So teaching woodworking. Passions will be teaching. One of my passions is traveling. I have my dream. You need to have dreams. You need to have a passion, but also have dreams. And my dream is to travel around the world in 80 days. And I will do that sometime, a couple of years. So my passion will be travel all around the world. So, you need to follow your passion, have multiple passions. So the answer is, no, I won't retire. And then, of course, like I mentioned earlier, I need to show my kids and my grandkids. My kids, I don't need to do it anymore. But I need to show my grandkids the world. I need to show them what it is to be in another country, other religions, other cultures, Africa. When you walk, and Jason knows that he works there, you walk in the supermarket in South Africa, and you're the only white person out there. Everybody looks at you, and you feel like, instead of majority, you feel a minority. That is kind of an interesting feeling, because now, having done that, I can relate who an Asian or a black person, and not to get on the political, but one of my grandchildren, actually 3 of my grandkids are 25% Asian. To have that idea, to be able to walk in these different cultures, different politics, people need to know that, to understand that. So that's my non-retirement story.
So, Herman, what are you thinking about the industry these days? You've seen a lot of changes. What are you thinking about, like enterprise imaging, AI, fire, pathology going digital, et cetera? I mean, there's a lot going on now. Where do you think things are going?
Yeah. So first of all, of course, anytime you have, this is crystal ball, anytime you do a prediction, I'm probably 50% wrong. I'm not a good predictor. Listen back to the story, maybe 5 years from now, I say, oh, I was so wrong, you know what I mean? But I have some good feeling about some of the things. Of course, the buzzwords enterprise imaging. It's not quite there yet, enterprise imaging. It's so radiology focused still. Ophthalmology and so many other ologies, they're barely getting there. So we have a lot of work to do in enterprise imaging. And of course, the challenge is the encounter-based imaging. Somebody takes a picture in the ER of a kindergarten. How do we map that up with a patient? Really, IHC is just barely scratching the surface of how to get all these images. It's going to be in a tsunami, avalanche. Everybody is going to have these point-of-care ultrasound things in the pocket. There's not going to be a stethoscope. Somebody has a stomach ache. Let's look in there. Oh, we need to store this picture. So enterprise imaging, very challenging. It will get there, but definitely not there. Fire is a very interesting topic. And I'm almost afraid to talk a little bit about fire because I think it's so unpredictable. Number one, where it's going to go. And I hope, and if we do it right, the whole fire, then it could be a complete rewrite, redo, revolutionary architecture. So what is fire? People think about fire, and I made a mistake myself. I mean, 6-7 years ago, I started to learn about fire. Now I teach fire, and I started to learn about it. I thought it was, okay, that's 807 in XML. So it's a different interface, but that's not what FIRE is all about. FIRE is not having to send 25 ADTs because patient information has changed to all of the different systems that have the patient information, but FIRE is having a central patient resource in the URL. We have a central provider resource. We can create EMR screen being a shell with all linking together. So you can imagine it's extremely frightening for the big EMR guys because we can deconstruct all of these systems and make these nice resources and tie them together. So where's FIRE going to go? I hope people have the foresight to rebuild the architecture based on FIRE. I fear that's going to be another interface standard and a replacement of version 2. And then it's not necessarily, then we have JSON instead of the pipes. So I hope people have that vision. And I hope some of those big siloed companies will start to doing deconstruction. But otherwise, there will be entrepreneurs that will do it for them. Yeah, maybe 5 or 10 years from now, we'll see where Cerner, Epic, Meditech, Philips, Siemens, GE, where they are. Maybe completely different names. I kind of hope so, but I really think there could be big things. And then, of course, the last word on these, digital pathology, we tried to set up some joint cooperation with the European community. You show me, and Sim, because digital pathology is so advanced in Europe. All of the Netherlands is completely digital, pretty much. They share images, pathology images back and forth. They were starting to do digital 5 years ago. We were at least 5 years behind in the United States for all kinds of reasons. There's no financial reasons, FDA stuff, going on, but it's amazing. So we'll have digital pathology very slowly, but that's definitely, that's guaranteed. If you want to say the crystal ball pathology is going to come, yeah, for sure. No question. Maybe next year, but then year after the year, just a matter of when.
Thank you, Herman. So again, the conversation can go on, but unfortunately, we're coming up to the end of the episode, so we have to wrap it up. As much as I want to thank you for everything, I still have one last selfish question, which is what advice, recommendations do you have for people listening to this? And especially one area they've been very passionate in supporting is imaging informatics professionals.
Yeah. Listening to my story might be interesting, fun, but hopefully what I like to do is to give you a couple of hints or kind of a guidelines of what did I learn that you might be able to learn from. First of all, I talk about passion. You need to have multiple passions, and the passion might change a little bit. If you're not happy with what you do today, don't change tomorrow, but figure out what your passion is. Follow your passion. And like my passion is now from engineering and healthcare, teaching, to really make a difference. So find your passion and follow it. And then second one, don't count on luck. You cannot sit there, okay, well, I'll be lucky. There's so many calls when you ever say, do you want another job? I want your opportunity. No, you have to persevere. You have to be persistent. You have to be persistent to achieve your goals. And sometimes you go, we talked about different roads. Sometimes you go left, sometimes you go right. And sometimes you go in a little bit area that maybe necessarily not maybe the right thing. The other thing is you need to set up attainable goals. And I really didn't talk a little bit about goal setting. A couple of years ago, I was talking with another humanitarian. He said, Herman, one of the things that I really like to do is climb the highest mountain in the world. So climb the highest mountain in the world. I said, sure, I'm in. So we said, let's climb the highest mountain. We do it for a fundraiser. And of course, if you know a little bit about hiking, it's Kilimanjaro, Tanzania. So we went back home and I was Googling a little bit, and it's very, very, very challenging. It was absolutely the most challenging thing I ever did. And I ran a New York City marathon, okay? So that was challenging. I barely made it 5 hours and I was cramping up and I had pain. But climbing Kilimanjaro was very challenging. And I barely made it. It's about a 4-day hike. The last night, in the middle of the night, you wake up and everybody gets together because it's so extremely cold. You're in the dark. You go up this mountain in a big row. You can only look 7 feet in front of you. You do a couple of steps and you go, and you wait for 2 steps and you go on another 7 steps. I was starting to close. I was starting to get dizzy. And one of the guides, he took me on the arm and we went up. So that was a just about achievable goal. And then when we all came back, we celebrated. And then this guy said, okay, next time we're going to do Nepal. We're going to go to base camp. I said, no. And when I'm already auditioning out of Kilimanjaro, you have to set attainable goals and know what you can and what you cannot do. I could have said 40 years ago, I want to be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. No, I'm just a small guy, I'm an entrepreneur, and you have to set attainable goals. And so make sure that you do that. Another thing that I really think is important, never ever stop learning. Never ever stop learning. I came to the United States, they said, what kind of education you have? He said, I have this engineering degree from this school in Holland. And he said, well, we don't acknowledge that. So got involved with the PACs, I go back to school. 2 nights a week, 2 years. Got my telecommunication manager at Brooklyn Polytech. I go to Dallas, Texas, work for Kodak. I want to be a program manager. I said, you're an engineer. You don't know anything about business and stuff and return on investment and net present value. I said, okay, I'll go back to school at night. I got my MBA. And it really helped me a lot becoming an entrepreneur. Never, ever stop learning. But here about FIRE. I have to tell you, FIRE is tough. I had to take the FIRE course 3 times before I really got it. Maybe it said something about the quality and the structures too. But anyway, so you really have to never stop learning. There's SIM, conference, webcast, e-cast going on almost pretty much every week. And if there's nothing going on every week, you can go to their catalog, learn about FIRE, H07, DICOM, image quality, never stop learning. And I think lastly, I call it walk in the footsteps of giants. Walk in the footsteps of giants. Mentors. Sam Dwyer, one of those giants, he passed away, unfortunately, in the early days of SCAR. He kind of liked me. He said, Herman, can you come over and teach DICOM to my department? They need to know that stuff. I said, sure, I go over to University of West Virginia, a good time, Sam Dwyer. So when he was ready, he threw me this big pack of paper. And he said, okay, you need to learn about this. That's the HIPAA standard. I said, oh, okay. I started reading it. I don't understand this. I put it in my file cabinet. 2 months later, he calls me up, Herman, you're going to do a HIPAA presentation at SCAR. I said, holy macro, I better study this thing. I give a HIPAA presentation at SCAR. Elliot Siegel comes to me and he said, Herman, you're suddenly the HIPAA expert. I was the HIPAA expert. I do with Elliot Siegel, a presentation about HIPAA at the RSNA for 500 people. Walk in the footsteps of giants. Sam Dwyer. I got a call one time from Dr. Diefenthal, another giant. Dr. Diefenthal single-handedly set up a radiology department in Tanzania. Very interesting story. He was in the German army, go to Russia. He almost died. He almost didn't go back. And he said, I'm going to make a difference in the life of others. And went back to Tanzania and single-handedly started a radiology department. And he asked me, Herman, we need to get a PACS. Can you go to Kilimanjaro Medical Center, KCMC, to put a PACS in there? I mean, and people said, oh, what great, and the things you do. But look at those giants that contribute part of their life. And you see them all over in Africa and things like that. So I was really honored to mention that. I got this Asia Outreach Award after people like Dr. Diefenthal and some other of these giants. And then Malura, who single-handedly sent up Red Aid, has now more than 10,000 volunteers. I don't pretend to be one of those great guys, but what I try to do, I try to walk in their footsteps. And eventually, maybe another 10, 20 years, and become a little bit bigger in their footsteps and become one of those semi-giants, so to speak. And but really look at it. Find a mentor and look for inspiration. Somebody will take them under your wing. And I'm sure people always wanted to share. People like myself and people like the SIM faculty and others. There always people that wanted to share that information to you. So this is my final words. So have multiple passion, be persistent, set attainable goals, never stop learning, and walk in the footsteps of giants. That's my message. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Herman. I really appreciate you taking the time. What it's the saying, the opposite of happiness is boredom. You must clearly never be bored and very happy. You're a very busy man. And again, appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you.
Of course, always. It was a pleasure.
Simcast has been brought to you by the Society of Imaging Informatics in Medicine. Please visit our website at siim.org for more information and educational content, including webinars and an archive of prior episodes. Please follow us on Twitter at sim_tweets. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support.